What is the name of the movie we're watching? And also, my nickname on the dance floor? The Boogeyman. I would like to formally apologize for what you just saw. Thank you as always for coming. I appreciate all of the feedback and support on my previous video. Today's video is on The Boogeyman, which is apparently based on a short story by Stephen King. But as we all know, me and reading go together like my dad answering my phone calls. It's just not going to happen. So without further ado, let me watch that for you. Catchy theme song, yeah, yeah, yeah. Nailed it. The Boogeyman opens on a shot of a baby's room. It's lit by like a disco ball thing. I'm sure there's a word for it. For babies, a baby's disco ball. You're showing a baby in a crib, and then the camera pans and you see this closet door slowly open on its own. And you hear like a menacing voice saying, "It's me, your dad." And the baby's crying and crying. And then you kind of see a claw kind of reach up onto the crib, and the camera pans to a family portrait, and then you hear, how do I put this in YouTube terminology? You hear noises that you would hear at the chiropractor. And then from the reflection of the picture frame, you see the closet door slowly close shut. And then we get the title card, The Boogeyman. We're then introduced to the protagonist of the story, Sadie Harper. She's also kind of peeking through a closet. It turns out it's her mother's closet. Her mother recently passed away in a car accident. So she goes through her mom's clothes and picks out a dress. We're also shown her little sister, Sawyer, who has this ball. I think it's supposed to be the moon, and it's this really bright ball, and I don't understand how you turn it on or charge it or any of that stuff. And she's kind of established to be like a kid, like scared of the dark, regardless of the boogeyman at this point. And then we also have Therapy Dad, and no, I didn't learn his name, but I learned 2 out of 3 of the characters' names, which is so much better than my last review. And Therapy Dad takes his appointments at home. He's got clients just in his home. I think that's weird. Therapy Dad ends his appointment with his client and then gets Sawyer ready for school, and Sadie comes down the stairs wearing her mother's dress. Dad drives the girls to school, and in the car we learn that Sawyer's tooth is loose, which will come back later. Just remember that. Sadie makes her way through the school. Everyone's kind of saying, sorry about your mom. She's got her headphones in, so she can't hear because she's going through it right now. And she gets to her locker and opens up a brown bag of lunch, I guess, that her mom packed like a month ago. So it's full of rancid old yogurt and an apple that's half eaten that we just had to see. And her estranged friend, Bethany, who I had to look up in the credits because I don't know if they ever say her name. Bethany shows up behind her, and you can tell that they were close, but maybe this incident kind of affected their friendship. But then you also realize that Bethany has this brat pack of girls, and they're not super nice. The blonde one, of course it's the blonde one, Natalie, I want to say that's short for. I guess my name is Matt, short for Natalie. Natalie does that thing where she's like, are you sure you should be wearing your mom's dress? Like, shouldn't you move on? And Sadie's like, I don't want to move on. It's been a 1 month. Like, give her a break. Natalie does that thing that all nice people do where you say something really mean, but you say, I'm just being honest. I'm just telling you the truth. And of course, Sadie escalates the situation, and it ends with Natalie pushing Sadie into her locker and getting all that gross month-old food all over her mom's dress, and she leaves crying. Back at home, Therapy Dad is finishing up a session with a client when he gets an unexpected visitor by a man with a Justin Bieber haircut. It turns out this man is named Lester Billings, who is the father of the child we saw from the opening. Therapy Dad says, I don't see new patients, but I'll make an exception. Here's some paperwork to fill out. And I kept thinking, like, is this covered by insurance? Like, is this out of pocket? Like, what? You can't just do this. Take it from me, dealing with health insurance reimbursement is way scarier than some supernatural monster trying to kill you. So Therapy Dad turns on a recorder. It's like the old-fashioned recorder, and goes, this is just for record keeping. I'm gonna replay this later and laugh at you. And then Lester goes on to say how everyone thinks his own kids, but it turns out that it's this boogeyman. The kids drew a picture of it. He rips it out of this notebook and hands it to therapy dad, but we're not shown what it looks like. He says it only comes after your kids when you're not paying attention. When someone suffers loss, it kind of makes them vulnerable to him. So it kind of preys on people when they are in a vulnerable state. And dad, of course, leaves the room going, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. And starts calling the police, leaving this man to just roam his house, which again, it's weird to take clients in your home. I'm sorry, it just is. It just is. We're showing Sadie at home, headphones in as usual, so she's not listening to anything. And she's opening the washing machine and throwing in, her mom's dress. And we see Lester standing in the background, kind of insinuating she's in danger. But then she gets up and Lester's gone. But we hear some rummaging around in the room where her mom's closet was. Her mom has like a workspace. She was an artist. She has paintings. And Sadie walks up to this door and stands in what appears to be blood. Uh-oh. And she falls back, all dramatically falls back, and then some blue and other color starts spilling out. So we learn it's just paint. Okay. Sadie picks up a clay scalpel in order to fight off this man that she hears in the closet, but she also hears like a tumbling, like there's like a fight going on, or there's some yelling. There's something. It sounds like two people are in there, and she barges in, and there's no one there, and the door kind of swings back closed, and we as the audience see Lester's body hanging from the door. On the school bus home, we are shown Sawyer and a friend, and we get our first gratuitous mouth shot of the movie. Can we do a thank you? Just to show her tooth is loose, and her friend says that's so gross. And Sawyer says, I know. And I, watching this movie, says, I know. It is so gross. I don't know why you felt the need to show me someone's wet mouth. We are then driven past Sawyer's house, and there's a body being pulled out in a gurney with a white sheet over it. And Sawyer's friend just outright says, oh, your dad's not dead too, is he? I had to pause the movie there for a second and just process what I just heard. Once Sawyer gets inside, we're shown the police are investigating, and they rule the incident as self-inflicted, but Sadie, not so sure. It's now nighttime, and Dad tucks Sawyer in, does a quick monster check, got the all clear. Sadie's laying in her bed looking up, and she sees these black vine things, kind of symbolizing, something's growing within this home. And therapy dad comes in to say goodnight. She kind of has this heart-to-heart about how she's feeling, and her dad kind of just says, well, you got a therapist, right? Talk to her about that. And she says, I was trying to talk to you. But therapy dad can help everyone else but himself. We are then back in Sawyer's room, and this monster is not messing around. The boogeyman just bursts open her closet door and then crawls out of it and goes straight under her bed. To which Sawyer then takes her ball and hangs off of the side of her bed. So she's upside down with her hands on the floor and rolls the glowing moon ball. And at some point you see the monster's face. And she gets so startled she slips and falls and hits her face on the floor. And then she goes to Sadie's room. This is where we are shown our second gratuitous mouth shot of the movie. Can we do the thank you? And this time it's someone's wet and bloody mouth. Thank you, the boogeyman. So the girls have the classic kind of cartoonish idea of tying a string around your tooth and then tying the other end of the string around the closet door. And they do the countdown on 3. So Sadie goes 1, 2. Sawyer says, wait. So Sadie drops her hand and goes, we don't have to. And at that point, the door slams shut, almost like something just yanked it shut. And the tooth goes flying on the floor. And Sawyer's so scared, and it's not funny. It's not funny, and I'm so tired of you guys asking me if it's funny when a child is scared. It's not funny. So then Sadie sings Sawyer an Irish lullaby, and I know it's an Irish lullaby because the subtitles say it's an Irish lullaby, and then the girls fall asleep in Sadie's bed. At that point, the camera pans down to the tooth that's still tied to the string that is still on the floor, by the way, you heathens, and the tooth is slowly being pulled to the closet door, and it hits the door frame, and it slides up, and then just gets yanked through. We then get a short scene of the sisters at a therapy session, I forgot the doctor's name, sorry. And she does the whole exposure therapy thing to Sawyer, who's afraid of the dark. She has this menacing red cube that just blinks, and the time in between the blinks get longer and longer until it's pitch black. And so it starts blinking, and you see the boogeyman crawl out of the closet, and it gets on the ceiling, and it lunges at her as she's holding on to her sister scared, and she's the only one who's like looking up at it, and she screams, but this thing also makes noise. I'm under the impression that anyone can see it. It's not like just because she's a child she can see it. It also attacked Lester before, the dad from before, and there's a part that happens later where it attacks somebody who's never seen it. So I'm under the impression that this thing is very like corporeal, like anybody can see it. It's not some ghost, it's not some curse, it's a real monster that just lives in the dark. And so none of them hear this giant scream at this poor child. Instead, they just hear her screaming because she's scared of it. And it's a movie. I won't ruin it too much. I just wanted to point that out, that's what I was thinking at the time. It's then nighttime of the same day, and Sadie does a Facebook research of Lester Billings to find out a little bit more about him, which then leads her to going into her dad's office and breaking the doctor-patient confidentiality and going through his patient files. At the same time, Sawyer is in her room under her blanket with her moon ball, and she's talking to Sadie. Sadie's like, go to sleep, it's not a big deal. And she ends up pulling off her own blanket to say something, and there's nobody there. So the boogeyman is sitting there mimicking Sadie's voice to her now, like the Wendigo from Until Dawn, which I'm very excited about the remake, by the way. So Sawyer takes her glowing ball and leaves her room to go find Sadie, because she still thinks Sadie's pulling some mean trick on her at this point, while Sadie is listening to the recorder that the dad made earlier of his appointment with Lester. Sadie also finds the notebook Lester brought earlier and sees that a page was ripped out, so she takes another piece of paper and kind of scribbles on it, so you see the impression of what was on that page from the page under it, and you see the drawing of the boogeyman for the first time. And then there's also this slapstick moment where she's listening to the recorder at this moment, and there's a loud jump scare noise, and she goes, "Whoo!" And she drops the recorder, and it flies into this full pitcher of water. Like, oh, oopsie. Oh, Butterfinger Sadie over there. So she goes to the kitchen to dry off the recorder. Meanwhile, Sawyer is upstairs rolling her ball around like she's Shannon O'Keefe in the 2016 Nationwide Pro Women's Bowling Association Sonoma County Open. She rolls the ball a lot. The ball rolls around a corner off screen, and you can just hear something smash it. And then at this point, I'm also wondering, why are there no lights on in this house? I digress. As Sadie is trying to dry off the recorder in the kitchen, she sees this pair of glowing eyes, kind of like when you see a dog in the dark. She can kind of see something's there, so she opens the fridge and lights up the room, and nothing's there. At that point, Sawyer comes in and yells at her for being mean to her and tricking her, and then notices the drawing of the boogeyman. And then Sadie decides to find out more about these victims. So the next day, Sadie gets her friend Bethany to drive her to Lester Billings' home, which is vandalized, it's torn down, it's very crack house core. And she walks through this hallway full of lit candles on the floor. There's like tons of them. And she asks if anybody's there. And I'm thinking, like, of course somebody's there. Otherwise, they're just incredibly irresponsible. And she ends up meeting Lester's wife, who I, again, had to look up the name. It turns out her name is Rita Billings. And she's rough and gruff. You know, her kids got taken from her and her husband's gone, and so she talks like this, and she's got the 1,000-yard stare. And she explains that the boogeyman latches onto people who are suffering. Like, it's kind of like a cruel manifestation of grief, you could say. The boogeyman does show up while these two are talking, and Sadie ends up running away while Rita shoots at it. She just leaves, so we don't know what really happens. She just leaves. I don't blame her. Once Sadie gets home, she rushes to her room while Sawyer is being an annoying little sibling. saying, I know you saw it. What happened? What's going on? He's real, isn't he? As Sadie slams the door saying, Sawyer, I don't want to talk about this. And then Sawyer's pounding on the door and Sadie goes back to scream at her. And the boogeyman just kind of busts down her door and just like hops down her throat.
I'm serious, Sawyer. I need to be alone.
But then she just wakes up in a cold sweat. So I guess that part was a dream. Her door is still intact for the rest of the movie. So I guess it's just she fell asleep and had a nightmare that the boogeyman jumped down her throat. Sadie then hears a noise coming from her mom's art room where we think it might be the boogeyman, but it turns out it's just therapy dad, who is clearly a night owl who has that random burst of energy to rearrange your entire room at midnight. And he's basically cleaning out all of the mom's belongings until Sadie convinces him to keep them. And he says, that's fine, but you got to put them in the basement then. So she moves all of the boxes in the basement and she finds a lighter and some weed. She also thinks she sees her mom for a second, but sorry, Sadie, this is not a ghost story, this is a monster movie. In her mother's belongings, Sadie finds an old video camera, which she then brings to school the next day and watches on the toilet, which I guess is the 1980s equivalent of watching TikToks on the toilet today. Sadie's friend Bethany, who even the subtitles just say friend, by the way, reaches over the stall, which I thought maybe would have turned into the boogeyman as some sort of scare, but it's just two estranged besties that decide to have a little get together at a place where a few days ago was an active crime scene. I'm just saying maybe have a girls' night at Bethany's house. The girls all hang out in Sadie's room on her floor, and TBH, it's totes lame. The bad girls want to drink alcohol, but Sadie says her dad's not much of a drinker and she doesn't have any, but she does have drugs. The girls pass the little joint around until it gets back to Sadie, and she takes a small puff and starts coughing, and she runs into the bathroom, and we get our third gratuitous mouth shot of the movie where she's pulling a string out of her mouth with her sister's tooth at the end of it. Still think smoking weed is cool, but also, how did it get in there? Was it when the monster jumped in her mouth? I thought that was a dream. I'm not sure, but we don't have time to think about that because mean girl Nat comes in and says, I want to see where that guy's body was found. So when Sadie shows them the art room and the closet where the body was found, Nat pushes her in and shuts the door, and it's jammed. She can't get it open. And this is where Sadie is confronted by the boogeyman. He just kind of growls at her as she's pounding on the door. And this is another one of those moments where I'm not sure who can hear this monster or why they can't, because it is loudly growling at Sadie. And once the door gets opened, mean girl Nat says she's just being dramatic before Sadie delivers the people's slap across her face. All the girls leave in a fit and they walk past Sawyer, who was allowed to stay up playing video games as long as she stayed out of Sadie's way so that Sadie could make friends. Some good that did. Okay, this is where I need to be a little nitpicky. I'm sorry, it's just who I am. I didn't notice this at first, but Sawyer is playing the video game The Pathless, and she's pressing a button on her controller, and it shoots an arrow at a torch in the video game, which makes a big bright flash and lights up the room, which is great to add tension as we see the boogeyman sort of sneaking around the room, getting closer to her. But there's maybe 3 lamps in this room. I'm just not sure why the lights couldn't have gone out, or maybe the mean girls flipped a switch or something on their way out to be like mean and destructive, instead of having Sawyer, who has been very resourceful up until this point, kind of just forget to turn the lights on. She ends up getting thrown into the TV and rushed to the hospital, and it's definitely not funny, so do not ask me about that. At the hospital, Sawyer wakes up in bed. It turns out Dad is crying, and Sadie goes to tell him the boogeyman's real, and he says, I could smell the devil's lettuce on you. And so he doesn't believe her. So Sadie then pairs up with Rita Billings, Lester's wife. Rita has a plan to end it all tonight and needs Sadie's help. So she decides to take matters into her own hands and solve this thing once and for all. Rita's brilliant plan is to zip tie Sadie to an exposed water pipe as bait. And she has all this tripwire laid out on the floor that is attached to, I guess, shotgun rounds that will go off and shoot the beast. And she's also got her signature shotgun that she was shooting off earlier, ready to go. The boogeyman makes his way over to Sadie and pounces, and right as he jumps at her, it triggers the trap, and is shot by a bunch of bullets and lays on the floor lifeless. Rita does the smart horror movie move and double taps the monster even though it appears to be dead already. Her biggest mistake is that she then turns around to Sadie and says, "I knew it could be killed," to which then of course it wakes up and pounces on her, and at that moment when it tackles her, her shotgun goes off and shoots the pipe that Sadie was attached to, and that lets Sadie slip out and barely escape the house as the boogeyman rips Rita in half like the Hulk did to Wolverine, only Rita does not have Wolverine's mutant healing ability, unless... MCU tie-in confirmed. I guess the boogeyman hates being outside because it is pitch black and Sadie needs to walk home, but it doesn't attack her. Sadie gets a call from therapy dad saying, "We've been looking all over for you. We just got home." He's carrying Sawyer in his arms. Sadie frantically tells him to not go in the house, to which he says, "Okay." Only he has opened the front door and then turned completely around to face the outside while the inside is pitch black darkness, and you've got Sawyer kind of going, "Dad, Dad," and then they get yoinked inside. I used the word yoinked in my last video, and someone asked me if it was a real word, and I was gonna look that up, but I forgot, and now I'm still not going to. Sorry. Anyway, Sadie needs to run home now and save her family. Also, this was the same house that she had Bethany drive her to earlier in this movie, so I'm not really sure how far of a run this would be. But to be honest, if you made me choose between cardio and getting eaten by the boogeyman, I would start slathering myself in ketchup and preheating the oven, okay? We are nearing the climax, people. We are in the home stretch. We can do this. So Sadie gets home and finds Sawyer in a closet near the basement. She has wrapped herself in these Christmas lights that blink red and then green. Sadie leaves Sawyer in the closet, grabs a hockey stick and her phone's flashlight, and heads to the basement to save her dad. She goes down the stairs a few steps and she turns around and she sees Sawyer with a can of hairspray and a giant extension cord for her Christmas lights. Sawyer is the best. They end up knocking over a can of lighter fluid, so I don't know, maybe that'll come in handy later. I guess you have to see. Then they see therapy dad being held up by the monster in the corner of the room until he drops dad and pounces at the girls. It ends up pinning Sadie down, and I don't know if she has plot armor or if she's so juicy, but it sucks, I want to say, life force out of her face, and it uses her mother's voice and says, "Hush now." Therapy dad comes up from behind and stabs the boogeyman with a broken piece of the hockey stick before the boogeyman swats him away and slaps him into a wall. Little Sawyer gets up from under some debris and she starts running towards her dad and doesn't realize that her extension cord is at its end and it gets unplugged, and so the sisters are in total darkness. Until you see dad flip on mom's lighter. Dad is all bloody and bruised and broken from being smacked, but he uses the lighter so that the girls can find him. They have a nice little family huddle. They go to lift him up, and y'all, I'm so tired of movies doing this. They have just the nastiest shot of his leg just going I will not show that to you on here. I will not do that to you. Just know that I have suffered to make this happen. It seems like all is lost at this point. The lighter is slowly dying. Dad can't move. They have no weapons. Sadie keeps trying to flick on the lighter, and just as the boogeyman is about to pounce on them, the lighter erupts in a flame that's bigger than it's ever been. And it's shown that Sadie thinks it's because of her mom. Apparently mom was a member of the Fire Nation this entire time. So Sadie uses the hairspray that Sawyer brought down as a makeshift flamethrower. And right as she is about to finish off the monster, the hairspray runs out of liquid. MVP Sawyer comes in with the can of lighter fluid from before and douses the monster as Sadie throws her mom's lighter on the beast, igniting it in flames. She also drops the F-bomb. The family limps out of this burning basement as all of Sadie's mom's belongings go up in flames. It's very symbolic. The final movie of the scene is back at the therapist's office, and this time it's the entire family, and Dad is finally ready to talk with his daughters and start the grieving process. As they leave, Sadie gets called back in by what we assume is the therapist's voice, and she goes into the therapy office and sees the closet door open, and she walks over to it timidly, and right as she's about to touch the handle, the therapist comes in from the other room asking, "Can I help you with something?" And it's at that point Sadie shuts the closet door and the credits roll. Let's have some final thoughts. I enjoyed the symbolism, or at least how I perceived the symbolism of the boogeyman being a representation of grief in the way that it can consume people in a more literal sense. I think the ending really was the boogeyman in the closet calling for Sadie, which goes to show that grieving a loved one never really goes away. However, loss is a part of life, and a life with loss is still worth living. Kind of a hopeful note in the end when you think about it. What did y'all think about the boogeyman? Do you think there was anything I missed? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you made it this far and you liked what you've seen, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to my channel. We're almost at 100 subscribers, which is really exciting. I am frantically trying to learn how to edit, so I do appreciate you all letting me try some new things. And I think that about covers it. Thank you so much. And again, I'm Matt Hall, and this has been another installment of Let Me Watch That For You. Bye-bye!